If you've been following along this training for Adobe Bridge and you watched the previous lesson to this, you'll know that we talked about the workspace a little bit. So we know from that lesson that we can view thumbnails with additional data depending on the type of workspace that we may select. So if I select the metadata workspace for an example, we'll see that I have rows here with columns giving me information about when that file was created, the size, the dimensions, the resolution, everything about it that I typically would want to know as a designer. But what if I'm in a workspace like the Essentials tab and it really doesn't give me much information aside from the name of the photo and the default view like we see here for this thumbnail? Now, I could always select that thumbnail and come down to the metadata information under the file properties to view the dimensions and file size and when it was created. But what if I want to view this information at first glance on the thumbnail? One way that we can set that up is to go up to the Edit menu up at the top, and we'll scroll down to the Preferences. And under the Preferences menu, we'll see an item there called Thumbnails. Now, our first option under this preference is that we can limit the file size of each file and tell Bridge not to process any file that is of this certain size. And the default is 1000 megabytes. The second option that we have here is to show details. So if I scroll this down a little bit, we'll see that currently it's just the file name like I mentioned before. But let's say I wanted to show size and dimensions. And you can kind of see in the background there that it's now showing the size and the dimensions of that file. So if I click OK, and let's say if I zoom in and out of these photos, that really does take up some real estate, and not everybody may be keen on that. Maybe you have hundreds of images in this folder that you're trying to shift through. You don't necessarily really care about the file size because you're going to bring it into Photoshop. One of the things that we can do, and here's a little trick for you, is we'll hit Control T or Command T on the Mac to hide that information in our thumbnail. So now not only does that new information that we selected go away, but also the name of the file goes away too. Now if I click on the file, of course I can come down to the file properties and still view information about that file. But that's just one way to get more space out of your workspace. So I'm going to hit Control or Command T on my keyboard again to bring that information back and hit it again to hide it. So if I go back up to the Edit menu and click on Preferences, back to the thumbnail view, now I'm going to select this final checkbox here called Show Tooltips. Now this is one way to get information too. Now we know that we hid the information by hitting Control or Command T on our keyboard, so right away that information isn't there. But if we hover our mouse over any of the images, it's going to display that information for us as a tooltip. So that is one quick way to do that as well.